All right. Today, Tom Terry, president of the Terry Group, is my guest on our CCA Emerging Leaders interview series. Tom, I mentioned at in our first segment in introducing you, you had a number of different leadership and volunteer positions within the actuarial profession, and continued to be a volunteer for the Conference of Consulting Actuaries, among some of the other professional associations. I want to talk a little bit about your experience volunteering for this next segment. How did you get your start volunteering?
Well, I think my very first volunteer role was as a session assistant at a continuing education. I think it was an SOA meeting, and it was very early on in my career, shortly post ERISA, and I can remember sitting on a panel up in front of the room with all these gods of the world, the gods of the profession. You know, I said, I can't believe I'm sitting here with these people that I've read their stuff, I've listened to them. It's like I was just thrilled to be part of that, and I remembered it. It was a phenomenal experience. I had a record that I had to, edit after the session and so forth. But I met these people. It was pretty cool. So that first volunteer opportunity stayed with me. I'll remember one other thing too. I wanted to write, and I did write my very first article and got it published through my first firm, probably 5 or 6 years into my career. And I then sought to write more. And so I've wanted to sort of create a voice. It was never my own voice. It was an amalgam of all the voices around me. I don't consider myself a radical or a radical thinker, but rather an amalgam of the best thinking that I have access to. And so I've always thought that that's a role that I play in my career. In terms of volunteering, Mike, what I went on after that is I think I probably did some speaking. I'm sure it was at a CCA meeting. I was a regular attendee at CCA meetings from the very earliest part of my professional career, and then joined the annual meeting planning committee, and which
you're still on.
I'm still on, but which was a phenomenal experience just because the people I met, and an orientation towards wanting to design and execute good sessions. And I then became a member of the board. And I will say, I just to rope back to something I know we've talked about before, Mike. I was on the board at the time when the CCA decided to impose a 30-hour requirement for membership. And at the time, the question was, it was really fun being on the board and wrestling with some issues like that. At the time, we board members were wrestling with the question, well, gee, will we see members abandon us? Will they leave? Will they stop joining or whatever? It was a choice point for the CCA. And what we concluded was that we believed that this 30-hour requirement is something that people are doing quite naturally anyways. It's not as if somehow it's a new high bar. All we were doing was kind of codifying or creating a membership requirement that was something that most of our members were meeting already. And so we posed the requirement, didn't lose a single member, and the rest is history. Because I think what we did is we set a standard for the U.S. profession to follow.
So I want to follow on to this a little, and I'll take it down a different road. But when you think about how volunteering has affected your career, like take, for example, the experience you just related, how was being in that room and having those deliberations with people, how has that actually influenced when you go back to your day job, the job you get paid for?
You know what, I'll tell you what, I enormously, because we've all heard the term echo chamber, and those that I work with day in, day out, I know what they think, I know how they, it's not to say that we don't generate new ideas and new thoughts and so forth, but I'll tell you, there is an echo chamber effect when I am just with the same people, listening to the same voice and the same perspective. I was blown away to find out that people in other firms are human beings as well. And it was astonishing to me, because, you sort of get fed the culture. You think that you're really cool and the culture is really cool and, you're better than everybody else. And then you discover that, oh my God, this profession is filled with really talented, really good people. And so that was number one. It was huge. I realized that there is talent and thoughtfulness and professionalism across the board, and different ways of thinking. I can remember, this is an interesting story. I can remember a debate that we had at a meeting, a professional meeting, about whether ideas that a firm has should be hoarded or shared. This is a new idea. Should we hoard it and just secretly take it to our clients, or should we share it and should we write about it? Now, the debate was fascinating. But the outcome of the debate is less important than the fact that the debate occurred, because I've always remembered that debate. And anytime I've got an idea or that we have an idea, the question is always, do we hoard it or do we share it? And I think there's reasons on both sides of that question. You know what I mean? But this is the kind of debate you can't have necessarily, in an echo chamber. And I feel that I've always encouraged all my people to attend professional meetings, just because of the diverse thinking and so forth that you can get.
Yeah, no, I like that, because I think, especially early on in an actuary's career, right, they might look at volunteering for a professional association as a way that's something you do later in your career to give back, to have that altruistic viewpoint. But a lot of what you said resonates with me. I started volunteering early on in my career, and that's what I try to tell people as well. That now the benefits that I get out of this, like personally,
right,
far outweigh what I'm contributing, and I feel like I do a decent job contributing. And so what advice would you have for especially younger actuaries that are considering, or at least maybe have that thought that, hey, maybe I want to volunteer. What should I do? Why should I do it?
Well, it opens up huge doorways into so many different possible directions. It's not a confining thing. Volunteering is not a funnel into something. It's really, it's reverse of the funnel. It's a lot, it creates this kind of an opportunity that just expands and explodes ways of thinking and ways of thinking about your own career path and so forth. So, I always encourage young people to, newer people to the profession, to seek out ways to volunteer. Assisting at sessions is classic. It's the best, just because you meet people and you realize that, wow, these speakers, these panelists, they're human beings just like me. And they wrestle with it. What do we present? What do we not present? Hey, I better brush up this part of the presentation. It doesn't come across that well. You think, wow, these people are humans. I thought that they were superhuman or some such thing. So I really encourage early on volunteering of any sort. And meetings, committees, those kinds of things are terrific ways to get your feet wet.
So let's talk a little bit about the U.S. profession, because as you mentioned, the actuarial profession, it's not huge when you compare it to some other professions that are out there. But yet within our profession here in the U.S., we have several professional associations. We've mentioned some of them already. You've got the Society of Actuaries, the Casualty Actuarial Society, the CCA, the Association, or the American Society for Enrolled Actuaries, and then the American Academy of Actuaries. Given that you've been at the helm of a couple of these organizations, what would you tell someone who wanted to understand why we have this plethora of professional associations for a profession that admittedly is maybe smaller than others?
Well, it's funny, as you rattled off those associations, something popped into my mind. I've been fortunate to have attended annual meetings at all 5 of those organizations that you've mentioned on more than one occasion. I've attended annual meetings at several actuarial associations around the world. And one thing that strikes me about every single one of those annual meetings is the sense of being part of a community, the sense of being part of something that's bigger than the individual and bigger than the individual's employer. And I think that's common across all these organizations. The United States, and by the way, I've seen enough other countries to sort of understand how the profession is organized outside the United States. And many people outside the United States say, well, how can you justify all these different organizations? They don't understand that. So believe me, I've explained this more than once to folks around the world, as well as in the United States. Because I understand that there can be some question about why we have all these organizations. I kind of break it down this way. We've got two international educators. That's the Casualty Actuarial Society and the Society of Actuaries, who are truly, we're fortunate to have them US based. As you know, both of those organizations have been bilateral or binational organizations for years, US and Canada, and they expanded internationally, and so their footprint is of course very much international. And it's a conscious decision on their part to be international organizations, and I think they're performing it super well and contributing massively to the growth and development of a solid, good profession around the world. You know, the creation of the CCA predates, I mean, I forget how long ago, 50 plus odd years ago, I'm guessing.
Yeah, 1950 is when the CCA's, when you look to its predecessor, that under a different name. Yeah, that's
sure. Yeah, that's 70 years ago. You know, the CCA was created, I think, as a home for consulting actuaries. And it's grown into what I think is the incubator for great continuing education for all actuaries, with a focus on consulting actuaries. And the CCA is probably the preeminent, you know, continuing education organization in North America and the United States. The Academy and the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, interestingly, are two organizations that were created in the mid-60s by the Society of Actuaries and the CAS primarily, and probably the others had something to do with it as well. Understanding that if licensing of actuaries was ever going to happen, we needed national associations that could represent those organizations before the government. Now, licensing of actuaries has not happened in the United States as we thought it might, except for one major exception, which we pension actuaries know well, which is the enrolled actuaries. In Canada, they've had more recognition in their statutes for the CIA, the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, than the Academy has enjoyed in the United States. The United States is a little bit more freewheeling, plus insurance regulation being diffused out into 50 states, which has made, you know, centralized licensing of the life and health business, you know, virtually impossible. Nevertheless, the Academy grew up as the National Association in the United States, just as the Canadian Institute grew up as the National Association in Canada. And then we have the Association of, I'll get the name wrong, of Enrolled Actuaries, formerly ASPA and ACOPA, which is really an advocacy organization for their client base and their customer base. And they fortunately participate in the code of conduct and in the disciplines of the United States actuarial profession. So we've got a cohesion of commonality across all these organizations, which is that we all define what an actuary is the same way. We all define how an actuary should behave the same way. We all define the kind of work and attestation that actuaries should perform in the United States the same way, which is the great cohesion that we have amongst these different organizations.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, and I hope it's helpful for those that are listening to this to just understand the roots of the different organizations and how they function today. That's obviously, I mean, we could spend hours just talking about that, but each of those entities do serve that their own, that they have a little niche in some ways, or some area that they cover, whether it's continuing education, research and credentialing, and the standard setting, all of that really does build towards a cohesive profession that works for all of our benefits.